Welcome to Disrupted Science, the occasional conversation between the authors of the upcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science. I'm Kent Anderson here with my co-author, Joy Moore, and we're recording this on Wednesday, June 25th, 2025. Hi, Joy.
Hi, Kent.
It's becoming kind of our trademark thing, I think. It's kind of cool. This week, we're going to tackle some different things. Mostly something I think people don't really talk about, which is this sort of newsletter economy that is in the sciences, the pros and cons of it, some of the platform details and things like that. But its effect too, and we're calling it the new gray literature, but it has traits that make it kind of strange, I think, driven by digital technology and the business models behind it. So it's a different thing. So we're going to talk about Substack, Ghost, and WordPress and all those things you've heard of and maybe even use. Who knows?
Yeah, new space to explore.
Oh, and then we're trying out a new feature, Rant of the Week.
Rant of the week. Should we kick it
Yeah.
off?
You want to kick it off with the
Should we
rants?
unburden ourselves before we get into the serious
Oh,
discussion?
why not? Why not? All right, so my rant of the week has to do with a blog post and an opinion piece, and one in the Chronicle of Higher Education, the blog post on Academe, which is a periodical from AAUP by Robert M. Kaplan. And he has taken the opportunity to use RFK's attacks on journals to revisit his glory days of 1999 when he had opinions about how digital journals should work and bring those up to 2025 without really changing much. And I just want to
Ken,
point out.
I had to
Oh,
ask you to clarify who he was, because there are a number of people named Robert Kaplan. So what's his deal?
so he's a professor at Stanford, I think. He's out in California. Um, he was at AHRQ and all sorts of. He's had various governmental posts and various academic posts. I think he's worked on two journals over his career in various sort of secondary editorial roles, I would say. And you know, now he seems to be in semi-retirement, and he's writing opinion pieces for a variety of outlets. And these are kind of his shtick now, kind of leveraging his academic credentials into having highfalutin opinions about things that maybe he should have thought twice about. So, but I got emails from people. I got people forwarding it to me saying, "Did you see this? I can't believe this kind of stuff's still out there." So I just want to pick a few gripes that I had with his, in particular, the Chronicle of Higher Education piece. The academe piece seemed like a rough draft of that piece, like he was clearing his throat for that one. So I'm going to focus on just a few things. One, I really find it irritating that somebody's using RFK's attacks on the journal space to leverage more attacks on the journal space. And even to just blow by the fact that he's attacking NEJM and JAMA and then say that commercial publishers vilify commercial publishers, not defend society publishers, just not even address the topic of the day. I find that very irritating because he wants to resuscitate this hobby horse of his, which is about, a lot of old gripes, which I'll talk about in a second. So another thing that he does is he uses the rhetoric of paywalls and expense keep scientific results from people. And that's not true. What it does is it keeps scientific reports inside communities that can use them. And reports are different than results, right? So I can get a result of scientific research by getting a car that's 25% lighter because of materials research, or getting, food that is less likely to spoil because of scientific research. I don't need to read the reports. Those are reports, they aren't results. Um, then he complains about the commercial publishers, how they now dominate the market. They didn't used to, and isn't that terrible? But everything should be open access, not really drawing the line that because of gold open access, the market is dominated and consolidated around major commercial publishers who have the economies of scale to handle that business model. So he just walking contradictions. And then the other thing he just brings up is he attacks Elsevier and their profit margin and compares them in one case to the banking industry. So he compares a single company to an entire industry average. And I can guarantee you that the banking industry has certain individual companies that have profit margins higher than Elsevier's, and they're also larger. But then he compares them to Apple and Alphabet, technology companies. And those companies are much larger. So, for instance, in all of 2024, Elsevier made or RELX, I should say, made $12 billion with a profit of about 4.85 billion. Just in the last quarter of 2024, Apple made $94 billion in revenue, $27 billion in profit. And they did it by, as you pointed out when we were talking about this, by giving high-end consumers high-end hardware, high-end software, and also, I thought later, taking 30% rents out of the App Store, which is there's a
Mhm.
lawsuit against that right now. So they aren't exactly a model of helping a lot of people, while Elsevier is publishing journals in sediment research, fisheries, food safety, medicine, much, I would argue, much more noble purposes. And if they need to have that kind of profit margin to be viable on a stock market where they're competing against Alphabet and Apple, then that's their business. And to vilify them does nothing. Profits don't matter to science. Science is science and profits are profits. You can be low profit and publish great science. You can be high profit and publish terrible science. Elsevier is high profit and they tend to publish very good science. So, and they do it across the entire spectrum of the scientific communities. So that was my gripe. I think this guy's out of touch. I would ignore his stuff and I would ask him to think twice and read the geyser. Get a little more current in your update your database, Robert M. Kaplan from California. That's my end of my rant.
Yeah, that was definitely a rant-worthy piece. Like you said, to invoke the name of RFK Jr. in journals, and to publish it in the Chronicle, and then go back in the space capsule, time capsule to
He
to
might have been both.
1999 to start. Yeah, wackadoo. No, to just pick on Elsevier again and say this is the reason to change everything. That was
Yeah, I felt
it
like I
just
was
it
back. I
just
felt I was 25 years younger. It was awesome. So I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. Well, everything old is new again, right?
Yeah, but you had an experience too.
I had an experience of I'm gonna riff on your rant a little bit. And this was published a couple weeks ago. And when I saw the headline, it I immediately clicked on it. Um, and this was a piece in Nature, and the title is "Dear Editors, Your Publication Delays Are Damaging Our Careers."
Mm,
Um, and this is about a early career author from Japan who had to wait 18 months to find out the decision on a paper.
mhm,
Um, and not to pick on this author, but I'm going to pick on him a little bit. The premise is to educate the publishing community that it's important to be published in a timely manner to uh, for your career as a
right,
scientist in Asia. And he
right.
pointed out, quite rightly so, that in different areas of the world, publication statistics uh, are factored in differently in terms of promotions. Um, but it's a very naive perspective.
Mhm.
And it's it's targeted at a broad audience, which is, hey, all editors out there, don't you know that we're sitting here waiting for you to get back to us? And he gives his personal examples, and he even gives a whole chart of how long he had to wait for papers A through J across different journals. And my rant and gripe is not as much with him individually. And this, I should note that this piece was part of the Nature Careers column that is
Mhm.
supposed to be for a community of scientists to share experience around their careers. And so in that case, it's appropriate, I guess. My real gripe is with Nature for publishing headlines like this,
Mhm.
especially what's in this day and age when there's so much going on around publishing, how it should be faster, it should be serve authors better. There's all these problems with cheating and fraud and open and preprints, and there's just so much. And this is the last thing that we need out there as another headline, picking on editors, inviting people like Kaplan to say, hey, I got the answer, we're going to fix
Mhm.
it.
Right.
Um, and so,
Yeah, the self-loathing is kind of it's become a cottage industry inside the publishing industry. Reform is one thing, but there's just kind of this self-loathing and I think that's representative of it, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
So that was my rant. Think a little bit harder about the types of things that we're putting out there, because they're being picked up on. And it's probably not doing early career scientists a huge favor to learn that sometimes you might have to wait, or you might have to learn a little bit more about how to shop around for a journal that's a better fit. So,
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. So those are our rants of the week. All right, so moving on to the main discussion. So I wanted to talk about the new kind of newsletters. So everybody talks about podcasts. We're starting one, as you can tell, obviously. And but the newsletters like the Geyser, like Scholarly Kitchen, like Journalology, like the Briefing, people aren't really talking about those in the same way, even though they have a massive effect, even in our industry. I think they change minds, they update people, people look forward to them, and or they can be brand makers or brand breakers in some cases. So I think we wanted to shine a light on those and then talk a little bit about the platforms. So I thought I'd start out, let's talk about one of the more interesting ones is the briefing to me. Um,
mhm.
so this is from Clark and Esposito, and I think it's monthly generally. They do some updates in between, but it's more of a marketing newsletter, but it's so smart and so well informed that it's a great lead generation tool for them. So it's free, but it could be paid. They could definitely make that a paid publication and people would
It's
pay
very
for it.
nicely produced too.
It's slick. It
Mhm.
shows their marketing chops. It shows their design chops. It shows how smart they are as consultants. It does everything really well. Um, and there's nothing more to be said about it. It's a great free publication that comes out once a month. I love receiving it. I think most people do, and it's a great
Mhm.
marketing tool for them. Scholarly Kitchen is probably I think was one of the earliest blogs that gained real traction. I launched that about 18 years ago, and it's good. It was a big brand builder for SSP. It became the most popular um, benefit of the association almost right off the bat.
And so, what was happening 18 years ago that made that a good idea?
Yeah, so Sue Kesner came to me. I was working at NEJM at the time, and she stopped by because she was local and she was president. And she said, "There's a lot of information going on, flowing about scientific publishing and a lot of research. We need a way to reach the membership with that." And I said, "Okay." And I had been in product development there and playing around with blog software. And I said, "Hey, guess what? I'll have something for you by the time you get home," knowing that in Boston traffic, I had plenty of time. So, and sure enough, I had something called the Scholarly Kitchen or something up. I don't know if it was called, it wasn't called that yet. But it had a blog up, and then we decided to call it the Scholarly Kitchen because we were just doing a brand exercise. And it's like, well, where does everybody gather at a party? Well, they gather in the kitchen.
Oh,
And we thought, okay, well, that's what we want. We want a place where everybody gathers. So became the Scholarly Kitchen, but that was the drive was to get research out originally, and then it kind of morphed into more of a business analysis tool. And now it's kind of in a space where it's SSP comms, business analysis, some guest columns that are a little bit more on the PR side, but still good industry updates and things like that. More of a mixed bag editorially, but still people love it, and it's chugging along. And it now works on an advertising model, which is another thing that changed because they created a standalone install of WordPress to run it so they could run ads. So now it has expenses against it that it didn't used to have. It has paid, I think the editors get paid a certain stipend every year. Used to be free, but now SSP's paying for it. It's
mhm.
become that integral to the organization. And so that's, an evolutionary tale there. So.
Okay.
And then I left the Scholarly Kitchen and started the Geyser, and that was started on Substack. And Substack at the time was really the leading edge of subscription newsletter services. It was back, I think this was back in 2018
Hmm.
and 2017, 2018. And they had just started, Hamish McKenzie had just come over. He had been a um, corporate communications person at Tesla, and he just published a book about Elon Musk called, I think it was called Not Safe at Any Speed, which might be
Yeah.
a message to your author who wants things to go faster. But its initial stance was they wanted to be an antidote to misinformation. They thought that social media was poison, and the advertising model with the incentives to target people in certain ways was poisoning the information environment. They wanted to make it so the subscription model and their own boundaries as platform um, stewards would make it so that that wouldn't happen with Substack.
And it
But they
was,
built,
wasn't it
yeah,
around the time when magazines were starting to get into trouble, business wise, or it was really starting to look permanent. And so it was also a home for journalists who
yep,
weren't
yeah, there were a
getting
lot of, yep,
jobs. Yeah.
yeah, there were a lot of talented people looking for ways to make a living writing still. So whether,
Hmm.
newspapers, magazines, some digital shops were shrinking like HuffPo and things
Hmm.
like that. So they had great timing in that regard.
And
And so they picked up, yeah,
it's a turnkey solution. So you could be up and running without having to be part of a broader network, you know.
yep, yep. It's a really slick system to get started on. They really showed the way to how, to make a self-service, do-it-yourself work for writers who just, you basically needed the most rudimentary knowledge of how to set up a website, how to do branding, and how to style and schedule content. So, yeah, it was beautifully done. But they built something in that I think has proven to work to their detriment and to all of our detriment, which was a revenue share model.
Yeah, so has and that hasn't that evolved over time, or was it all always
It was always
um
there. Maybe it's
yeah.
changed a little bit, and I know they negotiated with some writers so they have different rates, but my understanding it still is a 10%. They keep 10% of all subscription dollars that go through their system. And
Mhm.
that incentivized them to want to have as many subscriptions of any quality um, as possible. Because each one was, if it's $100 subscription, that's $10 in their pocket every time.
Mhm.
And so they really widened the funnel at one point, and they used the free speech sort of cyber libertarian view of free speech to do that. Basically, said that anything that inhibits speech is tantamount to censorship, and not recognizing that them having an opinion about boundaries on their own platform, which is a private thing that they run, is also free speech. So you can have free speech by saying no too. But they even at one point let Nazis on, which finally got enough pushback that people said, okay, that's too far. So they did draw a line there. But since then, it's become a feeder for Maha, and people like that, anti-vaccine conspiracy theorists and things like that. And it's really grown. And it led to me and other people leaving it, other writers leaving it for that very reason. So Casey
Mhm.
Newton, I think Ed Zitron's on Ghost now. He might have started there. I know others are thinking about it. Um, so, and then at Ghost is another where it's an annual platform fee based on wide bands of how many sends you have in a month. And that's all they care about is how many, based how big your audience is. They don't
Mhm.
take a rev share off subscription, so your price can be what it is. They don't, it doesn't scale linearly, so they aren't trying to always push a subscription. And they don't seem to have the same misinformation problem, also because their leadership has outright said, we do not want to be a factor in misinformation. So we're going to not let you on here if you're that kind of place. So,
Well, and the key differences that I noticed, and I'm just becoming more familiar with these two platforms, and being more of a newsletter consumer in the last year and a half or so, um, is that Substack has that platform feel. It is a platform where different content is commingled. There are recommendations for you to, and it automatically, opts you in, or however individual newsletters are configured. It's really pushing you to become a consumer of multiple creators on the platform. And then even in their chat rooms, it aggregates all the different chats from the different newsletters that you are involved with. And so it's went from a nicely siloed choose your own adventure as an individual creator to another platform, is what it
yep.
looks like. Um,
Yeah. And
Whereas
then
I haven't seen any cross marketing like that on the newsletters that I read that are on Ghost. It could be just the way they've been configured. But it definitely seems like Substack has more of an incentive to cross
Mhm.
promote on the platform, to build up the revenue that they get 10% of. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. When they put recommendations in place, that's when some of the writers said, whoa, what are you doing? Because you're recommending things that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Ghost has recommendations, but you as the creator can identify which newsletters you would want your readers
yeah.
recommended to be
Mm-hmm.
recommended to your readers. And that's, again, a very different model. And the other thing, like you mentioned, and we've come across things like that in the chats on Substack, sometimes they get pretty out there and it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty gross and bad stuff. And so, it's a platform now. It's a newsletter, chat, social recommendation, money, you know, growing platform. And that's a shame because there are some really good writers still on it,
Mm-hmm.
from in the science space. So Caitlin Jetelina, who runs your local epidemiologist with her team, it's now a team now. Andrea
Mm-hmm.
Love, Dave Gorski. I don't think he's on there, but is he? Is he on there?
I
He's
don't,
independent. He's
yeah, I don't
independent.
think they're on Substack, but
Yeah.
we'll
Jessica
correct.
Knurek is on there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some others that I read who are on there, but Jeremy Faust is on there. And I don't know what whether they're thinking of moving away from it, whether the benefits, you know, or just inertia are
Mm-hmm.
sufficient to keep them there. But then you have a whole bunch of other players there who have made hay and now are part of the Maha movement. So you've got Peter McCullough, William Makis, Alex Berenson, Joseph Mercola, Mark Hyman. And they are creating this little rat's nest of self-reinforcing titles that have
Mhm.
basically, I think without Substack, we wouldn't have, I don't think we'd have Maha, honestly.
Mhm.
My assessment is that Substack gave them long form legitimacy and subscription legitimacy. Basically, if you have to pay for this information, it must be good in a way
Right.
that they wouldn't have had on Facebook or X or Blue Sky or anywhere like that. So,
And it's interesting to see what they're cross promoted with.
hmm
Once you go into some of these newsletters, they are also part of other kind of sub networks um, that runs the gamut of conspiracy theories, alternate views on all sorts of things, not having anything to do with health, but it definitely appeals to um, the type of personality who would be interested in finding something that nobody else is telling you, whether it's
right,
about, how the government is run or whether you should be drinking fluoridated water.
right,
And so they're definitely using the platform in that way. And it's in some ways a lot more powerful and concentrated than just on YouTube or on Twitter or Facebook, even because they know exactly who's subscribing,
hmm
and they can funnel specific information to them. So they're not just depending on an algorithm, it's much more curated and it's much more targeted.
yeah,
And so when you see information coming out that is about medical information or the science that nobody's telling you, and it's more closely aligned with other types of fringe unrelated stuff than it is with the whole rest of the scientific literature, you're kind of directing these cattle
right.
down
Well,
the
it's like,
chute.
yeah, like YouTube got, into radicalizing, their algorithm was caught radicalizing people. So it kind of is a
Yeah,
radicalization funnel, right, that they've built
right.
there.
And this isn't, you can, YouTube and Facebook can say, oh, that's it's the algorithm, and we can't police everything. Well, these are humans who are doing it.
Right.
And then the Substack platform is amplifying it for them.
Right, right, absolutely. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how, so I came up through the gray literature, so to speak, with
Mhm.
newsletter publishing for a branch of medical economics. And it used to be the gray literature, so to speak, the newsletter literature was a place where aspirational editors and authors and experts would kind of get their training and learn how to do publishing or end their career with a publishing effort,
Mhm.
that was more practical, more addressing a clinical audience in medicine, let's say, or a practitioner audience in law, or, more they could just be more straightforward, like The Voice, they didn't have to be as academic. And so I ran into, worked with who's the executive editor now at JAMA, Phil Fontana Rosa. He was an editor of a newsletter. Dan Longo, who's at NEJM now, he was an editor of a newsletter I worked with. Louis First, who became the editor-in-chief of pediatrics, came up through a newsletter, and others, and even Harlan Krumholtz, who's over medRxiv, came up through Journal Watch Cardiology. But it used to be an aspirational path where they were, really attentive to the quality of the information and all of those things. And I think what's changed with the technology is that now there isn't, again, that community affiliation. They're more going after the public. They're going after big numbers. They're going after scale. And we're seeing all of again, there isn't this kind of conspiracy theory around, carbon fiber
Mhm.
science.
Right.
It's always nutrition. It's always whatever you put in your mouth or whatever gets injected into you. It's always
Mhm.
about fear. It's not about science. It's feeding insecurities and those recommendations. So Substack, in a way, becomes kind of the, you know, I don't know, the angst platform, right? For a
Yeah,
lot of people. It's like
it
if you want to
is
go somewhere and
stressful.
have existential angst about your life, go to Substack. So
Yeah, sign up for one of them and then you're gonna have to cancel your whole email address and start over.
exactly. So part of the reason this came up is that James Butcher is kind of publicly telling his story about moving to a subscription model, which is I find just, vicariously very interesting. And I want to see what he does. So James, if you're watching, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Tell us.
yeah.
Email me privately. I want to know. I'll keep it secret.
Also, we Ken and I have a bet on what the subscription price is going to
Mm,
be. So
yeah.
we'll
Don't
submit our
don't
closed
Yeah.
bids.
Yeah, we'll let you know who wins later. But so he's currently on a platform called Kajabi, which is kind of an email marketing platform from what I can tell, but they have other services. It looks like they're trying to repurpose it into newsletter publishing, but and it has platform pricing. It's not a rev share model. And he's hinted that he's found another alternative. I'll be very interested to see what it is. Betting it's Ghost, but that's not part of our bet. So let's just be clear about that. Um, the thing that's interesting to me is, and kind of a sad commentary on the state of affairs, is I think he's very tentative about even doing this. And I just want to take a moment to tell him, don't be. You do really good work. You put a lot of effort into it. Everybody likes it. Everybody likes to get your newsletter. I know I'm probably ruining my bet at this point, but um, don't apologize.
Yeah.
Nobody, it's not the OA mindset has gotten so that anybody who does anything subscription feels like they're bad. And I have an anecdote for this. I recently published a paper and the editor wouldn't accept it until I made all the geyser posts referenced in it free. I
Did you
couldn't
have
have
to
a paywall in
guarantee,
my references.
did you have to guarantee that they would be accessible in perpetuity?
I did not, but it was such a silly stance. It's not about the quality of the information. It's about whether there's a paywall or not. And we're
Yeah,
not going to publish your article until you remove the paywalls that you can remove.
yeah.
But that's the kind of environment we're in. And I think what James is reacting to is there's this, you
Well,
know,
wait a second. It could also be if somebody clicked on a link in your reference and they got to the geyser, then maybe they would want to become a subscriber to such an interesting
I
source
know,
of
and
content.
I agree. And maybe they would want to read half of a post and then subscribe to read the other half. I don't
Right.
know. We'll
Okay.
never find out. It was 10 references or something like that. So, but it kind of gets to the environmental
You
attitude,
should have told them to send in a self-addressed stamped envelope and you would mail them to everyone upon request. Try that next
That's right. That's right.
time.
I'll email you the reference if you need it. But I think that's why James is tentative. I think it's a shame. He puts in a ton of great work, and he should just come out and say, I work really hard on this. I'm going to charge you to get it from now on, or pieces of it. He's made a light version apparently you can get for free. But I'd say, James, just do it. Be proud. You're doing a great
Yeah,
job. Everybody loves it. Don't
yeah.
be shy. Um, so that's kind of, are there other things we wanted to talk about around these newsletters?
Um, Let me
I think they're having a
see.
huge effect on people, though. I think that's one thing we really need to track is they
Yeah.
are really shaping science policy and public opinion.
Yeah, I mean I guess the other point is I'm curious about the the audiences for some of the newsletters that the ones that we like.
Hmm.
Another one is Andrea Love's Immunologic
Hmm.
newsletter. Um, and and Paul Offit has one as well. And I'm just curious who is reading these. I mean, they have pretty large followings, but we can see that the bad guys, so to
Hmm.
speak, are projecting their stuff out there to change hearts and minds. And I'm wondering if the good guys are having the same effect. And are they gaining more traction? Are they enlightening people to truth? Or are they just are they preaching to the choir?
Right. Well,
So I
that's one thing. And
consider
so there,
myself a member of the choir, and I will forward things to people who need converting. But
you
I'm
want to
just
sing them
curious.
along, have them sing
Yeah.
along.
I
Yeah.
already know the words.
Well, but it gets to I think I had a post earlier this week about why Maha is better at comms, and it's because they can spin theater, right?
Hmm.
So all these conspiracy theorists, they can pivot to some new enemy, some new fear mongering, some new scare tactic. It's all theater, This is now the MacGuffin we're after. This is now the villain we're vilifying. This is now,
Hmm.
and they don't have to hew to a reality-based approach. Whereas I think the good guys and gals, Caitlin and Jessica Knurek and those people, they they have to hew to the truth. And the truth, as we've learned over the past decade, is boring. The
Well, and it keeps getting more out of date as the
right,
days go by. And so
right,
it's like they're dragging the experts back, all the way to Andrew Wakefield
right,
to
right, right.
rehash the same arguments over again and, explain it.
Yeah, it's exhausting to have to return to the same truth all the time to say, no,
Mhm.
up is up and down is down. It's like arguing with a toddler, right? It's just there's a certain point where you're just like, okay, mommy's going in the bathroom with this green bottle and of wine, and you stay in your playpen because that's their tactic
Is
is
that
really
what
one to
happened to you,
exhaust.
Kent?
Well, yeah. Sorry, Mom. Our secret's out. But so anyhow, so yeah, it's I mean, this newsletter space is different than it used to be. It's more
Hmm.
treacherous than it used to be. The good guys are having a hard time competing against the bad guys for a variety of reasons. Substack as a platform is making it easier for the bad guys to make headway, and they're getting rich doing it. And the other thing we were talking about this, we saw a TED talk from Hamish McKenzie of Substack. He's the journalist, and both of us were struck by how he just was squirming in
Mm,
his skin, towing the party line. But you could tell there's something he's not, his spirit is rebelling at some level.
yeah.
He is not liking, he's not really proud of where he is with this, I think, deep down. So
Yeah.
Hamish, reach out. We can help you too. Okay. Truth will set you free, my friend. All
Run,
right.
cat
So let's
cow.
move on to discoveries of the week.
Okay, so
All right. You want to go first?
I'll go first. I was thinking about what to talk about this week. It's not pickleball, although that's been going great. Um, or weird
Yeah.
shampoos. But
You're not you're not you're not having a problem in the lunchbox?
no, my lunchbox is fine.
She thought the kitchen was the lunchbox for a little
I
while.
get all these pickleball terminologies confused.
Sorry to out
So
you on that one, but you got my mom's going to the bathroom with wine, so which she didn't do. But
um so I don't this book came out a couple months ago. It's called No More Tears, and we'll put up a thing. The Dark Secrets of Johnson and Johnson. And this is one where I did judge the book by the cover because it's great. And I
mm,
saw it on the shelf at Barnes and Noble. Um, and it's by a award-winning journalist named Gardner Harris, who was the pharma and public health journalist for the New York Times for many years and Wall Street Journals and others. But he spent decades covering Johnson and Johnson. And this book is kind of a behind the scenes of a lot of research and discovery around what was going on within the company, basically across all of their verticals. from baby powder to hip replacements to Tylenol and all of the, little scandals and things that we've heard about as part of our popular culture over the last few decades. But this really digs a little deeper, and he tells a lot about the personalities behind a lot of the decision making within the company. And so if you've seen the any of the documentaries or series or films about the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma, this is in that ilk, and it would probably make a great documentary or a series. Um, and as it relates to journal publishing, I mean, there's a little bit um, about opioids and the NEJM letter to the editor. I think that's mentioned in here, but not too much. And then sure enough, this morning I saw that the Retraction Watch had done a piece in the last week or so around something related to Johnson and Johnson and mesothelioma in particular, around the baby powder. And it turns out, as part of legal proceedings, they were pressuring a journal to retract a paper. So Johnson and Johnson was asking a journal to retract a paper that linked 33 cases of individuals who use baby powder to developing mesothelioma. And that's remarkable.
Mhm.
If we come to think, just in the last few years of having rarely any retractions at all, to having these mass retraction events, to now let's use retractions
Right.
to
As a legal
whitewash our
defense. Yeah.
history
Yeah.
or to
Yeah.
change the paper trail
Right.
in many ways. So I thought that was pretty eye-opening. So it's a great book. I recommend it. It's a pretty quick read, and then follow along to see what these guys are up to next.
Yeah. Everybody's discovered the scientific literature and kind of it can be a tool,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
it's so shields up, people. It's time to
Mhm.
recognize the fact that politicians and companies and others are really, really busy in this space. They have, pharma has been for a long, long, long time. Um, but yeah, to use a retraction to try to change the legal argument, that's pretty interesting. That's a good find. My discovery of the week, I won't hold it up. I'll put a little graphic up, is a book. So as part of us getting published by Prometheus Books, I wanted to read a couple of their books. And one of them that grabbed my attention is called Evil Roman Emperors. And it's not Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which is to me the most immaculate prose in the world. You read that and you realize how far, all of us have to go as far as reading prose. Gibbons to me is the Shakespeare of prose, right? What he is to prose, what Shakespeare is to verse. And so that's a book that I would read just because it's delicious writing. This one I read because it's fun. I
Mhm.
mean, these people were nuts. And it's also relevant because a lot of the things they're doing, not as much with this throat slitting and streets running with blood yet stuff, but with the kind of oligarchic and populist and power crazed kind of ways. You definitely, history rhymes. We're getting some rhymes from ancient Rome right now with some of
Mhm.
the people and personalities and vainglory and egotism and, delusional behavior and things like that. So it's kind of fun to read in that regard too. So far, there hasn't been a horse. Wrapped in purple with, and with bejeweled neck and, all of that. So Caligula, we don't have Caligula yet, but it's a crazy fun read, the tongue-in-cheek writing style, and definitely a fun summer book if you want to have a little bit of evil Roman Empire in your summer reading. So that's my discovery of the week.
Excellent. I'll have to check that one out.
All right, so that's it for this time. We're now officially a podcast, so you can find us on all the podcast channels, Apple, Spotify, everywhere we hope you would look. It's Disrupted Science, so it's officially just an audio podcast if you prefer that. If you're watching us on video and you don't want to see our beautiful faces this time, or you just want to walk around and do stuff while you listen to us, that's fine with us too.
Yeah, we're happy to come along with you as you're walking your dogs or mowing your lawn.
So if you have thoughts for us, you can reach us at disruptedscience@gmail.com. And thanks for your attention. We'll see you probably in another week.
Yep. Stay cool out there if you're on the East Coast.
Yeah, no kidding.